Welcome back once again to Ask Dan Anything, and today we're going to be looking at careers, which we haven't talked about in a while. So I got a question from Maran. He says, I'm currently at a crossroads in my life. I need to decide if I go back to New Zealand and go back to my old job, or stay where I am and work for a startup but work like a dog for someone else, or do my own consulting work. So I'm going to try and generalize this as much as possible so it applies to everyone. Because what we've got here is the concept of that crossroads, of being kind of stuck with decision making about what to do next with your career. And I think the biggest mistake most people make, I'll call it a mistake for now, and what I see in Maran's example is starting with the end. So he's already starting with, there's three options: go back to New Zealand, go to his old job, start up for somebody else, or do his own work. Those are the final solutions, and he's trying to choose between them. But there's no sense of where do you start from. And I always recommend when people hit a career crossroads that they start from zero, because odds are how you got there wasn't entirely based on your integrity or your values, and it's a good time to renegotiate that. It's a good time to get back to what really means something to you. You're in a space where you can make a shift, a pivot, rather than continuing down a path that might not be right for you. And as time goes on, all paths stop being right for you. If you stick with the same thing over a long period of time, it will become outdated. There must be regular change to adapt and evolve. So what I suggest is that people at this position, they start with their values. Let go of all the things that they think are options. Not only are those things you're thinking of limited, you think there's only 3 options when there's probably a million. But also those are the options that we're bred to understand are the only things that exist. We're conditioned to think it's this or that or that. And yet we haven't really discovered what creating a career looks like, where we make something new happen, which is also an option. So I think it's important to start with values. Start at the beginning. What do you value? Now, if you've done values work, then you'll have a list of words that make sense to you. But for this particular conversation, I'll assume you haven't. And when I talk about values, I want to talk about what brings you inner satisfaction. I want you to take a moment, it's worth doing this exercise, where you look back at all the times when you were working throughout your entire career. Those times where you got lost in your work, not in a bad way, but those times where you're so into it, so engaged, so willfully participating, that you lost track of time, you didn't care how much you were being paid, it didn't matter what the result of the thing was, you just loved the work for the work itself. Remember those moments, write them down. What was happening at that time? What were those moments for you? And also write down the counter to that. What were the moments that are the opposite of that? The moments where you're watching the clock, waiting for the day to end, the moments that you would never do unless you're paid because they're just so awful, all those other things. And rather than looking at the tasks that were happening at the time, it's easy to get lost in it. You might think, oh, I really enjoyed that team meeting, so I want to do team meetings as a job? No. What I want you to do is look underneath that to see what values were you living by in those moments. Were you creative, courageous? Were you honestly expressing yourself? Were you connecting deeply with people? Were you resourceful? Were you determined? Were you leading? What were you doing in those moments that made them so enjoyable? What was it about those tasks that really clicks with you at a deeper level, underneath the tasks, the sensations and the beliefs going on inside you? Then you work forwards from those. Once you've discovered what those values are, you ask yourself, okay, what career, job, work, activity could I do to repeat that feeling, to have that valuable feeling, to have it all the time? And I want you to pretend that you don't know of any of the options out there, and you have to design this before you look at the options. So pretend you've never heard of any jobs before, in a sense. Pretend you don't know what your options are, and design the ideal job or set of activities that would suit those values. The thing that you would be excited to get out of bed in the morning to do. The thing that even if you're a billionaire, you'd still do it for free because it's just that good. The closest you can come up with for that. It'll be a draft at this stage. You'll develop it as you practice it. And also making sure that to identify what couldn't exist in that space, what is not allowed, what is a deal breaker for you, what will not be accepted. So you design a job, even if it doesn't exist. And that's the key. Once you've designed it, then you go looking at your options. You look at the first and obvious option. Does this already exist as a job? If I worked for somebody else, would I be able to make this happen? Is that an obvious choice? Which is very rare, I'm afraid to say. And then you can start looking at, well, if it's not, how do I create it? Do I have multiple part-time jobs that give me all the bits and pieces I need? Or do I need to become an entrepreneur? Do I need to design something myself? Like Marian says, be a consultant. In my experience, when I do this work with people, it's almost always that last answer. You have to design it yourself because it doesn't exist yet. There's always some key factor that ruins it. Like there might be a great job out there, but it's for a company that you would have to be enslaved to, and that doesn't suit your values. What you can do is look at the entrepreneur option, the thing that you design yourself, as the end goal, and then work backwards and have a look at what would need to happen before that. Well, I need to work with someone else to get a certain amount of experience and context before I can transition into working for myself. Or do I just need to work somewhere else to build up capital to start this thing? How long will I need to work there? And so on. So I suggest the main point of this video, start with your values. What would an ideal job for you be? Not because of what you're doing, but because of how you feel doing it. And then design the career from that, as if there are no rules. Just like I did. I'm a confidence coach, author, content producer. It's not really a job. I made it up because doing all those things fills in all those value needs for me, and I'd do it for free. So that's the key question. If you can answer the question, what would I do for free because it's just that good? Turn that into a job. It's always possible. So if you've got questions around that kind of stuff, send them through dan@brojo.co.nz. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you really want more on designing a career, grab a copy of my first book, The Legendary Life, and go through all the exercises and tools I have in there. And I'll see you guys next time.